As far as your time is concerned, this is probably going to be where students struggle the most. You really only have about 6 to 8 minutes to read through and kind of organize your documents. And that is not a lot of time right now. So I've been talking to people at College Board, and right now, College Board doesn't expect they expect a lot of students to not finish. Like, the expectation by College Board is that, oh yeah, there's going to be a whole host of students who don't get this thing done. And what they're anticipating is that a lot of students are going to just like not be able to, especially at home, like work at the pace that that you really need to write a 45-minute DBQ. Because in a normal testing scenario, you've got a proctor who's telling you, hey, 10 minutes left. They're pushing you. But when you're on your own, you have to push and time yourself. So this is one of the reasons that we're doing this thing for tomorrow. It is so crucial that you are able to push and time yourself. Now, there will be a timer in the top right of the test when you start it. So when you start the question, as soon as the documents come up, it'll be counting down from 47 minutes. How you use that 47 minutes tomorrow is going to be completely up to you, but it's highly recommended that you stick to these times that I'm giving you right here. That means that you really don't have a lot of time to look up a lot of information. If you are like, oh, I don't know this, I have to look this up, I got to look this up, I got to look this up, then you're going to be in trouble. You really got to move. That's why you have those period cheat sheets in front of you. Have it printed out, have them in front of you so that you're not looking up stuff. Instead, you're just looking to the information that you've already recorded. You got those Quizlet terms in front of you, and then you can just plug them in and go. All right, so that's the first thing. So what we're going to start doing today is we're going to start by, just like tomorrow, you got to be able to break a prompt down really, really quickly. So what I'm going to ask you to do right now is take 30 seconds, and only 30 seconds. I'm timing you starting now. And I want you to tell me, read this prompt, tell me what the skill is, and tell me what is the target. What are we evaluating? And 10 seconds. I'm looking here, looking here. Every single, well, almost every single one's got the right skill. Okay, that's time. So that's 30 seconds. Now, you really don't have, like, you cannot take more than 30 seconds to break down the question. So it's super important that that's the first thing you're asking yourself. What's the skill? What am I supposed to be analyzing? Because I need to figure out what the target is so that I know what I'm making my categories about. So this one, almost everyone got it. There's a few people that said comparison. It's not a comparison question. In this case, the skill is a causation question. The word causes is the giveaway. So don't overthink that. And the target is westward migration. What are the causes of westward migration? So I'm going to just be listing off causes when I put my essay together. There is no force in this one, and that's one of the things you have to be aware of. Not every single essay has a force, and that sometimes can be a good thing. It means that there's less restrictions on what the question is going to be about. Date range, important note, 1815, 1860. We should kind of start asking ourselves, like, what is significant about that? So 1815 is kind of framed by the end of the War of 1812, and then 1860 is the election of 1860 and the start of the Civil War. So I'm sorry, I messed that up. It's actually 1863. I'm sorry, I forgot I changed the question. The dates is 1863. Now, I actually did that intentionally. I changed this to include a historical piece of outside evidence, which I'll talk more about in a second. All right, so that's my bad. All right, so let's go into the structure. So because it's a causation question, right away you need to know how you're going to be formatting your essays. We are shooting for 4 separate paragraphs tomorrow. So you're going to do your intro, which will include your contextualization, your thesis. Make sure both of those things are good because you want to get those points out of your intro paragraph. And then in your body paragraphs, we're looking, if this was causation, it was this question tomorrow, it would be 3 causes. Cause 1, cause 2, and then most significant cause. And that's my complexity. So I'm going to identify 3 causes, and my 3rd cause is the most significant, and that's where I'm getting my complexity point, which is 1 point on the rubric. Okay? So that's how I'm going to set it up. Now, some students ask, do I have to start with my complexity? Do I have to start with X? Can I go A, B, X? Absolutely. It does not matter what order you put these paragraphs in. Just make sure you're hitting on a number of different causes and you've got your topic sentences and the documents fit into them. All right, and that you're finishing. Okay, so let's take that takes us to our next next slide, and this is going to be really important. So what we're going to do today is we're going to practice right now a document analysis. So one of the things I asked you to do is I asked you to print out this DBQ prep sheet. And the reason I wanted you to print that out was that I thought it might be valuable for you to use it and practice it tonight, so that you're not doing it for the first time on the test tomorrow. So here's what I'm thinking about I'm going to be doing. The next 5 slides are the 5 documents that go along with this question. And I'm going to essentially time you through these documents. So if we're looking at 8 minutes and you've got, I don't know, 5 minutes, 5 documents, then you're looking at a little over like a minute and 10, probably a little bit more than that actually, 6 to 8 minutes. So you're looking at between a minute and 10, minute 30 per document. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to ask you to follow along with me. I'm going to basically flash on the screen our 5 documents one at a time. And what I want you to do is I want you on a piece of paper, could be the DBQ prep sheet. If you don't have it printed out, just do it on a scratch piece of paper. I want you to jot down for each document, what is the document saying? What are some possible HAP that you could do? So your sourcing, do you want to do audience for this? Can you think of a historical situation? What HAP immediately comes to mind for each of these documents? And then what categories, what causes do you see emerging from each of these docs? All right, so we're gonna start this process right now. Is there anyone who maybe needs me to I don't know, hold off or need extra time to get yourself ready before we start these documents, or are we good to start? Can we begin this process? Okay, I'm going to take that as a big yes. We're all ready. Obviously, the faster we move through this, the faster you guys get to be on your way. So I'm sure that there's no complaints there. Okay, so here's what we're going to do. I'm going to start with the first document. I'll time you. I'll let you know how much time you have as you go. But we're going to have I'm going to give about minute 15 per document. All right, so here we go. Here's your first one starting now. Analyze it. Got about 30 seconds left. Ten seconds. And on to the next one. All right, here's your second one. 30 seconds. All right, here comes the next one. Here we go. Thirty seconds. Here comes the next one. Thirty seconds. And here comes the last one. Thirty seconds. And time. Okay, so here's the thing. That takes us to about 6.5 minutes, which you're thinking about, wait a minute, I got between 6 and 8 minutes. I still have, if I wanted, I can push it to 8. You can, but here's the problem. Remember, as part of your planning, you still have to categorize these documents, brainstorm contextualization, and also think about outside evidence. So at about 1:15 per document, that gives you time to analyze the question, to maybe look at your notes, to to plan out your essay and so on. So you really can't push it all that much further than that. Otherwise, you're going to start cutting into your categorization time. You're going to start cutting into your ability to think about a contextualization and some of these other things. So this is going to feel super, super rushed. That is probably the #1 challenge of this test. And it's also why we're doing what we're doing tonight. You have to make sure that you start to think about, okay, how do I break down these questions, these documents as fast as I can, and get as much from them as I can in such a short period of time. So here's what I'm going to ask you to do. I'm going to ask you to basically share with me the document that was the hardest. So every DBQ is different, and what I want you to do right now is just drag the question to the question mark to any document that you want us to go over. I will go over more than one of these because we have the time, but which are the ones that we are struggling on, because I want to talk through those first, so that you guys can do your categorization. Okay, so number 4 is looking like it's so far the clear favorite. Hold on, oops, my bad. So far the clear favorite is number 4. It looks like a lot of people are like, what is going on in number 4? Okay, and that's definitely, so we've got 2 and 4 are the big questions. Okay, so let's kind of go through that. Okay, let's spend some time on 2, 4, and we even got a question on 3, so I'll spend a little quickly. I'll go over 3 too. So I'm going to start with 4 because that seems to be the one that gave a lot of people. Oops, that's 3. That's the one that gave people some difficulty. Okay, so let me break this down for you guys. Governor Thomas Ford reporting to the Illinois Senate on difficulties facing Mormons in Nauvoo, Illinois. So right away you're like, wait a minute, hold on. Mormons in Nauvoo, Illinois, what does this have to do with migration? And it talks about how Mormons are being persecuted, how their leader, Joseph Smith, was assassinated in Illinois, and how Mormons are being, their homes are being burned by an anti-Mormon party in the area, and essentially they're being expelled. And where they're being expelled, it says they're being removed and pushed west past the Mississippi River, an area maybe towards Oregon and California. So for those that don't remember, the Mormons were a religious group that came out of the Second Great Awakening. And they were persecuted. They were actually originally formed in New York out of the Second Great Awakening, but they traveled to Illinois, and wherever they went, they were persecuted. And they were persecuted because they had beliefs that were different than typical Protestant Christianity, but they also practiced polygamy, which was viewed as immoral by a lot of Americans at the time period. In this case, and I don't know if we remember this, but the Mormons were pushed out of Illinois as well, and they were actually forced to leave the area and migrate west. And the place that they ended up settling in was Utah, actually around Salt Lake City in Utah. And so the Mormons actually found a place for themselves where they were free from persecution in the West. So it's a major migration, and there's something called the Mormon Trail, which took them from Illinois to Salt Lake City. So there's the migration component. And so we have to ask ourselves, why are they migrating? What is the cause of their migration? Obviously, there's some clues about that, which we can see in this document. Now, there's also questions about document 2. So let's go back to that. So document 2 is from Lansford Hastings, pioneer and author of The Emigrant's Guide to Oregon and California. So this guy is himself an author, and he's also a pioneer. He actually traveled on the Oregon Trail, and he's describing setting off on the Oregon Trail. And you can see Independence, Missouri is the place where a lot of these wagon trails, these overland trails left. And they would take these wagon trails out west to either California or to Oregon. Those were the most common destinations. And he's talking about just like the beginnings of his journey. You can probably pull some important stuff out of this because he's talking about going to Oregon. If you know anything about the Oregon territory, like what was good about Oregon? Why did people want to go there? Well, it was a rich farmland. The Willamette Valley was something that attracted a lot of settlers. And so they saw opportunity in new lands in the Pacific Northwest. And so that could be a cause that we could maybe allude to. The other thing that he's talking about is he's talking about like what is, I guess, attracting people on this journey. And he kind of talks about how they're entering this wild world. And he says that it's like as they travel on the trail, it reveals the American character. All appeared to be determined to govern but not be governed. Here we were without law, without order, and without restraint in a state of nature. Now that state of nature is transcendentalism. That's the transcendentalist, that you return to a state of nature. He's arguing about the opportunities of the West, and that it provides this opportunity for what we call rugged individualism, that we can go out west. One of the beauty of going there is that there aren't rules. There's not government. It's just you and nature, and you have to rely on yourself. And there's this level of freedom and opportunity that you wouldn't get maybe anywhere else in the world. So that's one of the things that's attracting people to the West. And then to move to document 3. Document 3 is John O'Sullivan's Annexation. So this is happening after the annexation of Texas, but before the Mexican-American War. And he's essentially calling for war with Mexico. And he's arguing why Americans should expand land, expand territory, and then migrate onto that territory. And the key sentence here is in this middle paragraph. It says, other nations have undertaken hostile interference against us, hampering our power, limiting our greatness, and checking the fulfillment of our, and this is the key word, manifest destiny, to overspread the continent allotted by Providence for the free development of our yearly multiplying millions. He's arguing manifest destiny. He's saying that God, Providence is another way of saying God, Providence or God wants Americans to expand west, and not only to gain territory, but then to settle it. John O'Sullivan, if you don't know him, he's the guy who coined the term manifest destiny. In fact, this is one of the original uses of that phrase, manifest destiny. Okay, so these are the documents. If you have any other questions about something, please throw it into the chat, and I'll answer that as well as we go. You're always free to throw something into the chat so that I can help you guys. Or like I said, unmute yourself. I don't see that as rude. Just unmute yourself and throw out something that you want to ask if something comes to you. All right, so let's kind of talk up through the next thing. Now, one of the hardest things for students is going to be this next step. Okay, so we've got the documents down, hopefully. So how do we introduce outside information is a question I'm getting. I'm going to tell you all about how to introduce outside evidence in a second. So we're going to practice that in a moment. Before we get into outside evidence, though, we have to have our topic sentences. So this is so critical tomorrow. You have to have good categories, and you have to come up with them quickly. One of the things that I'm worried about for all of my students tomorrow is that you're going to spend way too much time trying to come up with perfect categories, and that's going to drain you of your ability to actually write your 4 paragraphs. So you got to come up with outside evidence, you got to come up with categories, and you got to come up with them quickly. So what we're going to do is we're going to practice that right now. So on the fly, I want you in 2 minutes or less to give me 3 good causes that you could use to essentially group these 5 documents. So there's the 5 documents that are in front of you right now. Someone asked me about California Gold Rush for document 2. If you're going to talk about the California Gold Rush, it makes the most sense to talk about it with document 5 because it's so obviously linked. But you could tie it together in a more generic category, a more broad category, and let's see if we can do that right now. So I definitely see a possibility of linking 2 and 5, if that's something that you're thinking about. Let's see if you can come up with maybe a way of linking those and phrasing that. So right now, I want you to, like, I'm timing you right now. Oops, hold on. There you go. I want you to come up with your big causes, 3 of them, and it just needs to be the first things that come to mind. Do not overthink this. What are the first 3 things that like stuck out to you as causes that you could use to group all 5 of those documents? Oops, sorry, my bad. So the timer's running. We're about halfway there. We want to try to be able to finish our categories in the next minute and a half. Once again, all this is going to feel rushed. I'm sorry about that, but this is just, this is going to be part of the practice. I think this might be one of the most important things that we can do to prepare for May 15th is just drill speed. So in this case, you just got to go with your gut. Trust yourself. As long as you're not saying social, political, economic, it can work. So far, I'm seeing a lot of good ones. Remember, and this is important, we're not talking about what's the cause of westward expansion, we're talking about the cause of westward migration. So what is causing people to want to leave their homes and travel to those new lands? That's important to know. We've got 30 seconds left. All right, let's see what we got. So I'm going to share our screens. Okay, so here's what here's some of the stuff that you guys have written so far. So I'll talk a little bit about some of these. Now, all of these things work, and because I'm not seeing anything that's too broad here. So the idea of manifest destiny, absolutely, that could work as a bigger category. And so we're talking about this idea that Americans feel like they are destined to expand west, and so they're fulfilling that destiny, and that they go there because they believe that that the West belongs to them. That's an important idea. Greed. So we talk about desire for more money, or desire for more land, or for more material wealth. That could definitely be an argument that we could use. Escaping a religious persecution. So this first person, every single one of these categories would work. Okay, over here. Also escaping religious persecution. That's good. Belief in a new world to the West. I probably have to see how that category develops. It could work. I would just be interested in reading further to see what you meant and what documents you put in that. And then the availability of new job opportunities. So that economic factor, and I'm seeing that a lot. Here's what I'm going to go down to this one because I think it's a good one. Let's see. Wait a minute. Did they delete it? Hold on. Oh, I think the person who wrote it deleted it. There was a person who at one point yes, deleted it. One of their original arguments was forced migration. So people were being forced into the West. That is a really good one, because who else was forced into the West that isn't in these documents that you could easily then link in as outside evidence? Anyone want to throw a guess into the chat, or even just shout it out? Who else is being forced into the West who could potentially then be brought into this DBQ and add in on this one? There we go, Native Americans. And so we could talk about the Trail of Tears, and we could talk a little bit about the Cherokee Indians and those groups as being forced, and I could group those in with the Mormons. And so that could be a category that we use. So I guess the lesson here is you trust your argument, like trust what comes to your mind first. The first ideas are the best ideas, I guess, in this case, because this is not going to be a final draft. You're not writing a take-home essay. You have to just go with whatever comes to mind first, and then make those arguments the best you possibly can. Okay, so that's kind of the way that we're going to think about it. Here are just some of the different arguments that I came up with, and this is just when I was thinking about this. So gain economic prosperity, which a lot of you guys said, and there's almost all of these documents allude to like economic wealth and opportunities in the West, whether it's in the form of land, whether it's the form of gold. Like even John O'Sullivan talks about dominating the West with the plow. So that is a reference to obviously farming. Another thing we could talk about, the draw of the freedom of the West, like that rugged individualism, that transcendentalism, that self-reliance that we saw, especially in document 2. There is religious beliefs, so like escaping religious persecution or finding religious freedom. They both mean the same thing, or just maybe just inspiration from religious beliefs. Because remember, we can not only talk about the Mormons, but also manifest destiny as a religious component. He's talking about how God is like pushing Americans to do this. We could go with find gold or strike it rich. Now that's a super narrow one. It only has one document that's obvious, but there's also then lots of terms that I could bring into that. Then there is the greater equality, finding greater equality. I don't know how many people noticed. Did anyone notice? Let's just throw this out to the chat. Anything interesting about document 5 that would allow you to do something beyond like striking it rich? What about document 5? It would allow me to group it into a category of greater equality. Does anyone know? Why am I grouping document 5, the picture? Yes, racial inclusion in the West. I don't know if anyone noticed this, but there was both African American and white minors. And California was a free state. And so it was an incredibly diverse place that attracted, obviously, freemen, like even like people like freed blacks in the South, as well as free blacks in the North traveled to the West. We see the Chinese coming. We see the Irish going. We see like people of all different types that are going to the West, and the West offered new opportunities and potential freedom because they're escaping society and they're moving into the frontier. So all that could like the fact that it is a diverse picture allows me to do more things with that document. I could also talk about desire for the expansion of the institution of slavery. Remember, Southerners were like motivated to bring slaves into the West in order to try to expand slavery. So we could talk about the settlement of Texas, for example. As Americans are calling on people to settle Texas in that first document with Sam Houston, they're also like bringing slaves into Texas to expand the growth of cotton. Okay, and so there was an element of slavery in certain parts of westward migration. There's, the Kansas-Nebraska Act. We have slave owners that are traveling into Kansas territory in order to try to affect the outcome. So all of this kind of fits into that narrative. And then, that's all I have there. So let's move on to our next question. All right, so our next question is to, once we have our categories, write a thesis. You have essentially 2 minutes, and that is it. to write a thesis out of your categories so that it hits the thesis point. This really has to be something that is done very, very quickly. So you're on the clock right now. You have 2 minutes. Make it count. One minute left to finish up your thesis. Ten seconds. All right, that's 2 minutes. So let's take a look at what we got here. So here are some of the thesis statements that we came up with. So although the cause of westward migration included the greed of Americans and to escape religious persecution, well, that's good. The most extended cause is the idea of manifest destiny. So this is excellent. We'll definitely get the thesis point. The only thing I would say is instead of using the word extended, use the most important, say the most significant. But other than that, very good. So we got, although Americans moved to the West to escape religious persecution and fulfill their part in manifest destiny, the most significant reason is to find better opportunities and resources that the West offers. So that would absolutely get all the points. It's got complexity. It sets you up nicely for a really good essay. Although the idea of manifest destiny and religious freedom caused westward migration from 1815 to 1863, the most significant cause of westward migration was economic opportunity. Okay, so manifest destiny, religious freedom, economic opportunity. So it's clear, I can clearly see where your arguments are. And really important, what I like that you guys are doing is that you're not trying to get super fancy with your words. You're just using the words of the skill. This caused this. And do not be afraid to do that. Like in our DBQ, they know you only have 45 minutes. They want you to be as clear as you possibly can. You don't need to use extra language. You certainly shouldn't be using, like synonyms and or anything like that. You should just be going with plain language that is clear with what you're trying to say. And I see you guys doing that here, and that all looks good. Forced migration, gaining land, the most significant cause was the wish for economic gain. Good, good. So all of this is looking really good, guys. And the key here is going to be to come up with this quickly. And that is going to be the challenge, I think. So here's what I came up with. This was mine. It says, already a typo right here, sorry. Although increased nationalism and deeply held religious beliefs drew people to the West, the most significant cause of westward migration between 1815 and 1860 was the chance for greater economic prosperity. So I actually, my thesis isn't all that different from what you guys have. And even if it was, it wouldn't matter. Your thesis statements work. Don't think that the categories that I use have to be the same that you use. That's a great thing about the DBQ. There's so many different ways to make a right answer. All right, so you don't doubt yourself. That's going to be super important that you build confidence as we get closer to May 15th. Okay, so what we're going to do next is we are going to talk contextualization. Now, contextualization has to be done pretty quickly too. And so before we jump into a written contextualization, I just want to brainstorm as a group. Hold on, let's go back to this. Sorry, my bad. So I'd like to know just what big trends do you think would work? Before we write a contextualization, let's talk through as a group. Okay, what are the big trends, and write one or two big trends that you think might be able to be used. Remember, we don't want to put anything that we would use that are in the documents or that we'd like to use as outside evidence. So don't do manifest destiny. That's not going to work because that's in document 3. But beyond that, what is going on that maybe sets up this particular question? So I'm already seeing some really good ones. Now, you don't have to write the whole one out. I don't want you to write the in order to understand yet. Just write the trend. We'll get to the in order to understand in a second. So I don't want anyone to have to worry about. Just list off a few things that you might think would work. All right, so let's see what we got so far. We can continue to brainstorm. I'm going to show these responses. So the first one says Industrial Revolution. Definitely works. I'd be a little bit more specific. So anytime we can talk about industrialization this time period, if we can use the phrase market revolution, that's going to be more specific. And I do see a number of people that said market revolution, market revolution, market revolution. So that's good. Antebellum immigration, a really good one too. We just covered it. And so it makes sense. Some of the people that are going to be traveling are going to be immigrants. So that could work. Improved transportation. That's a good one too, because it allows people to go out west. So we could talk about new technological advancements like Robert Fulton's steamship, the growth of canals, the B&O Railroad, that kind of stuff is all within the time period. We got annexation of Texas is mentioned, so we don't want to say annexation of Texas, but Mexican-American War is not. And so that is something that we could potentially throw in. Let's see, War of 1812, I love that one. That's the one that I use. And it's great for a number of reasons because it kind of sets up the market revolution. It sets up those feelings of nationalism. Let's see, a transcontinental railroad is going to be outside of the time period, so we just want to be aware of that. So remember, we're trying to stay immediately in the time period or just before it. This is something you got to be really careful. Don't go way, way, way too far in the past. Now, something that no one wrote, I didn't see anyone that did, we could have done if we wanted to. Another one that could work would be Jeffersonian democracy and the Louisiana Purchase, which kind of adds to lands that we had at the same time period. So that's also something that we can do. So let me just ask you now if we know those things. So let's just kind of take a mental note of the ones that we've said so far. Market Revolution, that absolutely works. Mexican-American War, Jeffersonian democracy, the antebellum immigration, War of 1812, improved transportation. So every single one of those things works as a big trend. But I want you to show me, I want to see if you can do it right now. I want you to write me a contextualization using this format. Now you have to be able to write a contextualization tomorrow in about at most 5 minutes. So I'm going to time you right now and see if you can do that. So knowing the trend, Like, can you pull in now a specific citation and then tie that trend back to your prompt? Don't forget all three parts. So the key here is just to be fast. And that's why we practice in order to understand Westward migration, we must first understand blank. The blank was like whatever trend you're using. This was this, and it's illustrated by this, and this all connects back because of this. So I know it feels formulaic, but it's intended that way to be faster. We're about halfway there, 2.5 minutes it's been. So some of you are well on your way, which is good for your pacing for tomorrow. Minute left. About 30 seconds. Looking, we've got just a few people that are finishing up, but it looks like most people are pretty much done. I mean, that's a good sign. Okay, I'm going to show the responses here. Let's see. So let's see, I wanted to do ear canal. Okay, so here's a good one that fits that ACE. Okay, so the trend that they used was marker evolution, citation, Erie Canal, and then the tie back was connecting the economy with faster travel. Okay, so when it's all said and done, it looks like this. In order to understand the different causes of westward migration from 1815 to 1863, one must understand the development of the market revolution. Okay, there's my trend, there's my A. During the market revolution, a national economy was developed as the markets of different regions were becoming more interconnected with improved transportation. For example, canals such as the Erie Canal and inventions such as Fulton's steamship allowed people to move around the country more freely. And that's a great, like if you're struggling with like just a transition sentence, like how do I introduce my citation? Just say, for example. It's a great way of just getting into your Quizlet term pretty quickly. And then I can say these developments not only interconnected the economy, but sparked an increase in westward migration with faster travel. So there's my tie back, okay? And I need to make sure that I'm mentioning in that tie back something about migration and moving west, okay? So let's see some other ones that are worth exploring. Trying to find one that's different. So let's see, I'm trying to find, there's a steamship one. Oh, here's one on American neutrality in the world. Let me read this one. So some of these I'm reading for the first time. Okay, so the War of 1812. In order to understand Western migration, one must first understand the War of 1812. There's my trend. The war arose after the U.S. claimed its neutrality in the world, yet other nations such as Britain and France did not respect it. During the Napoleonic Wars, there's a citation, the U.S. was expected to choose sides, yet the U.S. would not give in. After the War of 1812, Americans became filled with a sense of nationalism, that's awesome, and pride, thus leading to a sense of national superiority. Therefore, the U.S. began to expand its territories, and Americans began to migrate to these new lands. So that's a great one. I love the fact that you are connecting the War of 1812 to the rise of nationalism, because essentially that is something that's going to be fueling migration and westward expansion during this time period. So these are really, really good. As the key here, once again, is just that timing. So I'm just going to show you what I had. It's actually very similar to that last one. So I used the War of 1812 as my big trend. And what I did was I said, in order to understand westward migration from 1815 to 1860, one must first recognize the War of 1812, which was fought between the U.S. and Britain over neutrality and control of Western lands. During the War of 1812, the United States defeated Tecumseh and his confederation of Native Americans and gained control over more lands in the area of Ohio, Indiana, and Illinois. There's my citation, Tecumseh. The War of 1812 created an increased feeling of nationalism within the United States, and the greater control of lands encouraged more Americans to call for expansion and move west. So there's my tie back. So I'm tying the War of 1812 to the opening of Western lands and those feelings of nationalism that are driving people into those lands. Okay. All right. So that gets us to this idea of outside evidence. Now, I had a question about outside evidence. How do I introduce outside evidence? So there's no trick to introducing outside evidence. You would introduce outside evidence the same way that you would introduce outside evidence if this was a normal LEQ. You would just say, like, use a normal transition. Say, in addition to document 5, another development that helped us understand, like, the desire for land was this. Okay, or like, but just use a transition and talk about how a piece of outside evidence that isn't mentioned is also related to your topic sentence. So there's a number of different pieces of outside evidence that we could use in this one, and we're going to actually practice trying to introduce a piece of outside evidence. So here are just some of, and this is not all of them. This is some of the pieces of outside evidence that you could have pulled into this DBQ. There's actually a lot more. So there's the Trail of Tears, there's the Santa Fe Trail, there's the Oregon Trail, there's the California Gold Rush. The Donner Party is one that probably is a little bit more obscure. The Donner Party was a group of people that got trapped in the mountains on the way to, I want to say it was to California, and they ended up eating each other. There was some cannibalism that took place among the Donner Party. They were like a failed attempt at westward expansion. There's the Texas Revolution, which isn't mentioned. the annexation of Texas is. So if you're talking about the Alamo and you're talking about the Texas Revolution, that works, but the annexation of Texas does not. The Mexican-American War, I also believe, is not mentioned either, so that would work. Southern Manifest Destiny. So even though Manifest Destiny is mentioned, Southern Manifest Destiny is not. So you can use like the Ostend Manifesto, for example, or the Walker Expedition, and how like Southerners were expanding into like southern areas to try to expand slavery. And then it goes all the way to 1863, which means the Homestead Act can be used as well. And that's during the Civil War, when the government actually gave away those 160 acres of land in order to try to entice people to go out west. Of course, there's others as well. But these are the kind of the ones that came to mind initially for me. And some of these are going to be used as part of your HAP, but they could also be used as outside evidence. So here's what I want us to do. I want us to practice right now outside evidence. There are 2 points available for outside evidence, and it is so important that we get them. So when you're doing outside evidence, you want to make sure that you distinguish outside evidence from like your document. So you could say like another example, or you could say another development that also demonstrates this cause is this. Or we can say, in addition to this document, we also see this and this. So like, just make sure that you include some sort of transitional sentence that lets the grader know that this is something separate from the last document that you used. And if you're worried about that, maybe you use your outside evidence first before you get into your documents. There is no rule that says you have to start after your topic sentence with the first document you want to analyze. Maybe you start with an outside piece of evidence, develop it, and then move into your first document for that paragraph. That could work too. So here's what I want you to do. I'm going to let you choose any term for that list or an additional term that you might think of your own. I want you to basically make the following argument. So I'm going to give you your topic sentence. The topic sentence is, the most significant cause of westward migration was the desire for greater economic prosperity. So this is probably the one that you guys said the most. So I'm going to let you choose any term on that list, or any term that you could maybe you thought of on your own. And I want you to write me a like at least 2 sentences that would earn your outside evidence point. So what you have to do is you have to introduce your outside piece of evidence, explain what it is, and then tie it back to this topic sentence. And in doing that, that's how you're going to get your outside evidence points tomorrow. So make sure, I see a lot of people doing California Gold Rush, which is great, as long as you make sure that you say that beyond just there was gold found in California. Find any kind of detail that you can add to that, other than that's self-explanatory. California Gold Rush is where they found gold in California. Okay, we got to be a little bit more specific than that. So what do we know about the California gold rush that we can throw into our description that would help us show the grader that we really know what this term was or what it was about? Like, where in California? What year? You know, like what happened immediately after the gold rush? Okay, who was brought? Who was you know, who came because of the gold rush? It's something. Give me something more specific, and that'll help you ensure that you get the outside evidence point. So I'm just reading through your examples right now. So this would be like outside evidence is like a great situation where if you have that cheat sheet in front of you, like you don't want to be going looking up California gold rush, but if you have that cheat sheet in front of you of your, you know, your period 5 information, and California gold rush is one of the terms that you had under your period 5 westward expansion story, like you would just type in the description of that of the California gold rush, and then you would make your tie back. So I will say this: tomorrow, when you're coming up with outside evidence, you know, look to the terms that you included on your cheat sheet, because that's going to be a great source of information, specific information that you can use to build a better essay. All right, so I'm going to start to show these responses. I like the first one because it's got some specifics. And so another example of economic prosperity causing westward migration is the California gold rush. California gold rush happened when miners found gold in at Sutter's Mill in 1848. So I got some specifics there. Sutter's Mill is part of the California gold rush. 1848 is important too, because that's when like they struck the original gold. And so now I know that this person understands that term. This led to westward migration because Americans moved to gold to economically prosper by finding gold. I think that's good. I think you could maybe elaborate a little bit more on that tie back, but overall it's a good piece of outside evidence right there. This is a nice transition here. In addition to documents 2 and 5, the Homestead Act also provided an economic motive for westward expansion. Settlers are offered 160 acres of land to any settlers who were willing to farm and cultivate there. This provided an economic motive as families moved to these land plots in an attempt to make a living as farmers. Okay, so right there I know what the Homestead Act is. I got some specifics. I got 160 acres. There's a nice transition there, so I know it's separate. I know it's separate from the documents. So that's good. All right, and let's see, just a few others. California gold rush that started in 1848 was the great competition that allowed people from all over to come to strike gold to become rich, as there were instances where people became exponentially richer. This was also near Sacramento that allowed it to be the capital of California and its hub of gold. This was the main cause for many people to move to the West and find gold to become economically and financially elite. So good. I can clearly see the economic argument there. We got some specifics like the mention of Sacramento. We got a year in there. And so it's beyond just like general, I guess, discussion of the term. So if you can do that, like I said, please, like, don't try to reinvent the wheel. If you can find the whole point of adding those Quizlet terms to your cheat sheet for tomorrow is to use in either the outside evidence or as the historical situation for your HAP. So really tap into those terms and like use them in order to kind of build more historical evidence into your DBQ. Okay, so that takes us to the last thing that we're going to cover. All right, so this is the last thing that we're doing, and then we're done. And that is our HAP. Okay, so how do we write a good HAP? So first of all, like the good thing about this DBQ is that there were lots of different HAPs that you could use for any of these different different documents. So document one, you could have used point of view. Sam Houston he's in our book. He's a kind of a famous Texan. So you could have done point of view for him. Andrew Jackson, who he's writing to, is a famous person. So that would allow for audience. Purpose is kind of embedded because he's writing a letter for a reason. He wants Jackson to take action. You can figure out what that is. You can write purpose. Document two, the same thing. You've got purpose and formula. He's writing a guidebook. So he's writing a book to try to teach people how to go on these trails. And so that's the purpose of document two. But there's also historical situation. 54, 40, or fight. Which is something that was mentioned in the review that we did on Tuesday. That could be the historical situation, the acquisition of the Oregon Territory. Document three, point of view. So document few, you got John O'Sullivan, who coined the phrase manifest destiny. So you know he's a nationalist. You know he's an expansionist. We know that he's religious, so we can make some references there. We also know that happens between the annexation of Texas and the Mexican-American War. So we could use the Mexican-American War or like Texas's independence as the historical situation for that document. Document four, we could talk about, this is the one for on the Mormons. This is the one for, we could use purpose, like why it's a report to the Senate. So why is the governor reporting the events? We can talk the audience because we know who the audience is. It's a governmental body. It's the Illinois Senate. And we can do historical situations. Second Great Awakening. We could talk a little bit about the growth of the Mormon Church, and then obviously how that leads to eventually them settling in Utah. So all of this could potentially work for our HAP. What we're going to do is, I believe we're going to do a HAP on document 5, because I think document 5 is honestly the easiest. Now, anytime you get an image, a picture or a map, and you're going to get, by the way, at least one image tomorrow. Someone asked me, could I use Mormon Trail for document 4? Yes, you could. You could use the Mormon Trail if you knew what the Mormon Trail was, because it's not directly mentioned in the actual document. Remember, it cannot be mentioned in the document, and it can't be the actual thing that the document is. So like, for example, if I was reading Abraham Lincoln's Gettysburg Address, I couldn't say, the historical situation is the Gettysburg Address. I'd have to do something else, okay? So what we're going to do is we're going to do document 5. And the reason we're doing document 5 is you're going to be given an image tomorrow. When you get an image tomorrow, like, do not do purpose for pictures. And remember, don't ever say for purpose, the purpose is to show. Historical situation is by far the best and probably easiest part of HAP to do. Because if you have terms in front of you, then you can pull in some of those extra terms on your cheat sheet in order to try to, do a good HAP. So what I'm going to ask you to do is I'm going to ask you to write me a HAP for document 5. And I'm keeping, this is the easiest HAP that you could have done. And we want, if you have an obvious HAP, go with it. So I want you to use the cues. In this case, our cue for historical situation is the following. The historical situation would start at the time blank happened. So at the time the document was published, or the time, in this case, the picture was taken, this happened. Which is important understanding because of this. And I would explain how the event helps us understand the document. So what I want you to do is I want you to write me a good HAP, and then I also want you to write me a good tie back. So the tie back here is, our topic sentence is going to be, one cause of westward expansion was the hope of finding gold and striking it rich. So I want you to give me the historical situation, tell me why that's important to understand the document, and then lastly, tie it back to finding gold and striking it rich. This may feel like an obvious one, but some of your HAPs are going to be obvious. So make those ones count. So you're really shooting for about 3 sentences here. Introduce the HAP. Tell me how the HAP helps us understand what we're seeing in the document, and then hit me with the tie back. And that's kind of a good rule of thumb for incorporating HAPI into these documents. We'll take 1 more minute to wrap this up, so that we can. I'll give you so I can give you my HAP as well, and then we are done. I'll just open up to any kind of general questions for tomorrow. So far, I'm looking through these HAPIs, and like these are pretty strong so far. I mean, the one, like some of you have to keep going. I think the biggest problem is that some of you are unsure of yourself, and you're just kind of like you're writing choppy. So remember, tomorrow you just kind of got to feel the flow of the essay. All right, so you just got to have to keep typing, keep writing. Okay. One of the advantages that we have of typing stuff is it's a lot easier to erase if you make a mistake. So just like when you're writing, you're just gonna, if I was writing this thing out, I would just keep going. You know, what's the next thing that comes to mind? You're gonna want to have to do this like that kind of same type of writing, only now with obviously a computer, tomorrow. So once you start typing, just flow into it. You know, we don't want to stop and pause a lot, because then you're never going to get through this whole thing. Okay, so just write it. You know, and try to make it as good as you possibly can. So I'm going to start showing some of these responses, because there's a lot of good things here that I think that we can learn from each other with. So here we go. And I'm going to kind of point out some stuff, because each of you do this slightly different. And I don't want to make sure that you understand that there are multiple ways of getting this happy. So here we have, like, starting with the, I'm just going to read through this. At the time that the image was taken, the California gold rush began. So the historical situation is the California gold rush, which most of you identified. And here's the thing. Now, if I use the California gold rush here as my historical situation, I can't also use it as a piece of outside evidence. So I'd have to choose which one that I would want. In this case, it's probably easier to do it as a HAP and get the point for the HAP, and then just bring in another piece of outside evidence for something else. So at the time the image was taken, the California gold rush began, which was a boom of gold and silver found in California and the areas surrounding. This is important because it displays why Americans were so urgently migrating to the region to work on mining. Because of the new promise of wealth in the Western region, many Americans took it as an opportunity to find wealth without needing to take a wage, thus leading to many Americans beginning to migrate westward. Okay, and so there, I got a clear tie back there. And so what this person did, and if you have the time, it's not a bad idea to do it. Just like we've talked about earlier this semester, if you can put that like Doc 5 historical situation, like a historical sit or historical situation at the end in parentheses, that's great, because it kind of focuses the grader on what you were trying to do. That's not a bad move if you have the time. All right, don't do it if you don't feel like you're running behind. But if I'm like moving with this thing and I got time to like put like my parenthetical citations in, I think that's something that could work for a lot of people here. At the time the picture was taken, the California gold rush was in a good swing, which is important to understanding document 5 because it depicts two boys working together in the mines to find gold. This ties back to trying to find gold and striking it rich because Americans were trying all methods to find gold and strike it rich, which included using young boys to find gold in the mine. Okay, now here's the thing. What I really like about this particular hap is that there is a direct reference to what we're seeing in the image. And that's always great. Anytime I can connect the bigger historical situation to what I'm actually seeing in the image or what is actually being said in the document, that always makes for a richer hap. And so like that, I think, is what this particular happy's strong point is. At the time the photograph of Doc 5 was taken, California gold rush was occurring. This is important to understand why there was an African American and a white man working at the same job. The gold gave opportunities to all migrants and gave hope and anyone could become rich. The gold rush drew out migrants from China and all over America. So this is an excellent hap. I love this hap. It's got the California gold rush, and like it directly ties into that diversity that we talked about, and then explains why. And then this idea that everyone could become rich ties back into that topic sentence. So I think this is a super strong example, and I think that one was done really, really well. Okay, so but you'll notice everyone's doing it slightly different. Like this one, some people are saying at the time the picture was taken. Some people are saying at the time document 5 was taken. Sometimes some people are saying the image. It does not matter as long as I as a reader know exactly which document that you're referencing. So all this is done really good. It's just a matter of making sure that you get it out right away. Don't like sit there and hem and haw about what is the perfect wording. Just say your hap, use the cue, say what your hap is, make a reference to the document, how that helps us understand the document, and then tie it back to your topic sentence. Those are just the things that you're thinking about as you're going through every one of these documents. Now, here's the thing, and I'm going to say this about hap. This is super important for tomorrow. You want to hap as many of these as you possibly can. But if you start running out of time, the hap is the first thing that you're going to have to drop. So if you only hap like 3 documents, but all of a sudden you've only got 10 minutes left and you still have a paragraph to go, you might have to just explain the document and tie it back so that you can get all of your documents in. Try to hap every single document. Try to use all documents. Try to hap every single document, but just keep an eye on that time. If I'm going to do something to save time, and I'm gonna hap, like let's say I've 3 documents happed and I want to like speed up, then the first thing you should do is drop the hap. You should not do a piece of outside evidence because it's a full point. So don't drop the outside evidence. Never drop the tie back because the tie back is worth 3 total points on the entire DBQ. So the hap is something that if you start getting in a time crunch, that's where you're going to kind of maybe save time in some of your later paragraphs. But make sure that you that's why you want to start off trying to get these haps done, try to get those outside evidence points in, and you want to keep moving so that hopefully you don't have to start cutting in your essay. Now, here is the hap that I did. Let's see here. So I did audience, and I did it for document number 1. And so let's say if my topic sentence was, one cause of Western migration was increased nationalism that had taken hold of Americans in the early 1800s. How could I do audience for that? So my audience was the letter from Sam Houston was intended for Andrew Jackson, who was a military acquaintance of Houston and the current president of the United States. This is important to understand in the document because it explains why Houston is urging the annexation of Texas. Houston is appealing to Jackson's, it's supposed to say nationalism, sorry about that, nationalism, as well as his hatred of the British. This demonstrates a desire by many settlers, such as Houston, to spread American influence across the continent. And so what I have here is I'm starting off with who's the audience? Andrew Jackson, who's not only the president, but also like a military leader that Houston knew. So there's my audience. I'm explaining how he knows him or kind of why the audience is important. Then I'm going to talk about how that audience is tied into what's being said in the document. That's my importance. He's referencing Texas to kind of appeal to Jackson's nationalism, but he's also talking about the British because he knows Jackson hates the British. So like by saying, well, the British are interested, but we really want to go with the United States, he's trying to get Jackson to take action and to like actually like take the moves to make Texas part of the United States. And then that ties back to those feelings of nationalism that Sam Houston and both Andrew Jackson have. You could also flip this and do purpose. Like he's intentionally trying to convince Jackson to annex Texas. And he's doing that by kind of making him think that there's another offer on the table. And so Jackson needs to hurry up. He's making a sales pitch. That's the purpose. He's not just saying that Texas is a great place. He's trying to get America to actually make Texas a part of it. Okay, so that is the end.